Richard the Lionheart is one of the most English names I can think of. The name alone stands along imagery like a Spitfire, Winston Churchill, or a cottage pie. However, something that a lot of people don't realise is that Richard the Lionheart was actually more French than English. The man lived a truly extraordinary life, but met his unfortunate end by a frying pan. Hello! Welcome to Break and Spill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and today we're going on a history lesson. But with fireworks and no homework. Yes, I'm going to be that cool history teacher that you never had. Now, who was Richard the Lionheart? Well, otherwise known as Richard I, he was born on the 8th of September 1157 to Henry II, King of England, and Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine. As third in line to the throne, he was destined to chill in royalty but not have the burden or the responsibility of being in line for the throne. A pretty chill life. That's what you'd think anyway. However, despite being enthroned as the Duke of Aquitaine in 1172, he was disgruntled with his lack of authority and therefore decided to join in the revolt against his own father. You know, as you do. And he also revolted against his own brothers soon after that. He basically was working his way up to the top. You know, as you do. This rather dysfunctional family went down in history, or as some might say, the perfect topic for a brain spill video. From the age of 8, young Richard spent most of his growing up years in Aquitaine, a French-speaking duchy in France. After a bunch of fighting and scrapping, Richard was eventually crowned King of England in 1189, after the death of his father, Henry II. Even though he was the King of England, he was still spending much of his time in France, and really throughout most of his life, he wasn't really even in England all that much. As a matter of fact, throughout his entire lifespan, he spent about 6 months of his life in England, mainly because of the fact that he spent most of his time going around the rest of the globe getting into fights. So, in his absence, he appointed William Longchamp as Chancellor of England. So, at the very least, there was someone holding the fort whilst he was away, doing whatever it was he was doing. So, what was he doing all that time? Fighting and killing. That was pretty much what he did. Because even though he was king, you've got to remember, first and foremost, he's a warrior, and that's what he did. Richard fought in the Crusades in 1190 to 1192 in Sicily and Cyprus. Whilst many of his campaigns were successful, he was actually imprisoned in Austria in 1194, which allowed much of his previously conquered territory to be reclaimed in his absence. This included lands and castles that were taken in France. Later in his life, once he was eventually free from prison, he would go back to France to basically keep fighting and keep killing, in order to reclaim what was once lost. So, Richard the Lionheart was in France. He was going back and conquering much of the territory he previously lost. And at the rate he was going, some historians think that he may very well have gone on and conquered the entirety of France. He was that good at fighting and killing. That was until 1199, when him and his men were in Limousin, pushing back against a revolt from the Viscount. At the same time, they besieged a nearby chateau named Chalus-Chabrol. Richard the Lionheart was walking the perimeter of the chateau without wearing his chainmail, as you do when you're about to besiege an enemy fort. So by this point, he was obviously walking around fairly confidently, looking at the walls of the castle and thinking, why on earth are those pesky French not letting me in? Just let me in and let me conquer. That's the only reason I'm here. Come on, guys. Give them a break after all. Guys, just let me in, please. Let's save time for both of us. Look, at the end of the day, if you let me in now, I promise I will use my sharper sword when I lop your head off. Make it quick and painless. So he was waiting to be let into the keep, and as they were trying to besiege it, the people who were inside the keep went along the tops of the walls, and they all looked down and saw Richard waiting, and they all got out their pots and pans and started waving them about. In particular, there was a particularly young French boy called Pierre Bazel who was also there, who was waving a frying pan at Richard. As you do, you know, someone's about to conquer you, the only thing you need is a frying pan to defend yourself. Anyway, the castle itself was quite poorly defended, And the reason for that was they didn't actually anticipate anyone would actually come and try and besiege them, meaning that they basically had to try and reinforce the ramparts with anything they could find, including pots and pans from the kitchen. So yeah, even though he was only young, he was up there on the walls with everyone else, waving his frying pan. Whilst everyone's waving around their pots and pans, this boy puts down his frying pan, pulls out a crossbow, and shoots it at Richard. Bear in mind, Richard is walking around without his chainmail on because he's an idiot, and well, the next thing he knows, he gets a crossbow bolt straight in the shoulder. And that must have hurt a lot. Silly, silly man to not wear his armour and get distracted by a boy with a frying pan. Truly a noble way to go. I don't think he was that young, I think he was like 18 or something at the time, but generally that's quite young for, being in a battle. So yeah, that was probably why he was able to use a crossbow. Now, the shot wasn't fatal, it didn't outrightly kill Richard, but you have to remember this was a long time ago. They didn't really have the same medicine that we have today, and as a result of being shot, the actual wound he had got infected and eventually he would get gangrene, which at that point in time, that was pretty much a death sentence for anyone. Yes, this young French boy hit the first domino that would eventually lead to the death of the King of England. You would have thought that the king would be pretty pissed off by this, being shot by a crossbow, but he actually called for the boy to come to him. And when he did, he actually forgave him for what he did and told people to not mess with him and basically just let him be. You know what? It was a fair shot, and that's a nice thing to do. Richard the Lionheart would soon die as a result of his injuries, which, even though he explicitly told people to not do anything to the person that shot him, they then got hold of the bowman that shot Richard and flayed him alive and hung him. So even though he'd explicitly said not to, they were going to get retribution either way. There are some variations to the story, but it is generally accepted that this is the story of what happened, and this was the trigger event that led to the death of Richard the Lionheart. All because a French boy was waving a frying pan at him. The perfect distraction. If you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to be notified as soon as I upload my next video, be sure to hit the bell button. And if you've got any ideas for what topics you'd like me to discuss next, let me know down in the comments below. As always, sources used in the video will be in the description. So, if you're going to take anything away from this story, the next time someone waves a frying pan at you, I'd be a little careful. I wouldn't take it for granted, as you never know, that frying pan might just meet your end. Especially if it leads to a crossbow bolt going straight through your left shoulder. Pretty nasty way to go. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.